You're listening to Change Your POV Podcast, episode 38.
Only worrying about yourself and doing things for yourself, but everyone has low points. And when you live your life in a way where you treat the people around you like you love them and that you care about them, then when you need that, you will have that.
Welcome to Change Your POV Podcast, helping you navigate transitions in your life like entering and exiting college or the military, changing jobs or careers, and providing you with the coaching and mentorship needed to help you advance in your personal or professional life. Sometimes all you need is to change your point of view. Now, here's your host, Eddie Lazary.
Hello, folks, and welcome to Change Your POV Podcast. I am your host, Eddie Lazary, and today we have a special guest, a fellow podcaster, a fellow veteran, my brother, Mr. Jay Knight, and I'll get into his intro in a minute, but first, a word from our sponsor, Audible.com. Audible has over 180,000 titles to choose from in their library. Everything you can possibly imagine from every genre. They've got comedy, they've got drama, they've got international, they've got education, they've got business, they've got, you name it. Whatever you want to listen to, whatever books you're reading right now, I'm sure if you go and look, you will find that book on audible.com. It also makes for a fabulous gift. If you just have this person in your life and you're not sure what to get them hooked up with an Audible account and some free tokens so they can download some of their free books. It's excellent to take and download on your phone if you're going to take a long trip vacation or an airplane flight or a long drive or a commute to and from work. If you're out shoveling the snow, mowing the grass, working in your garden, whatever it is that you do, take a book with you. And you can head on over to changeyourpov.com/free book for your free 30-day trial and a free audio download. That's right, changeyourpov.com/free book for your free 30-day trial and a free audio download. Now, let's get into this interview with Jay, already in progress. Welcome, everyone, to Change Your POV Podcast. I am here with Mr. Jay Knight. Jay grew up in East Moline, Illinois. He was raised by his grandparents in a blue-collar household and had a pretty good childhood. 9/11 happened during his sophomore year of high school, and he decided he was going to serve. He went to the Marine Corps boot camp a few months after graduating high school, and after boot camp and SOI training, ended up in Weapons Company 2nd Battalion, 7th Marines. He served 2 tours, first as a turret gunner, and then as a mobile assault platoon assistant patrol leader before moving into a squad leader role for foot patrols. His last 7 months in the Marines was spent working for the 7th Marines Regiment, running their Indoor Simulated Marksmanship Training facility. Wow, that's pretty cool. I'm going to have to ask you some questions about that. He left the Marines and went to college. He attended Southern Illinois University, where he graduated with a bachelor's in economics and a minor in business. During school, he co-founded his first business with his best friend and roommate. After graduating, he led a charity project called Packs to Packs, a cross-country bicycle ride that visited 24 children's hospitals from Boston to Seattle. They raised $15,000 for a child's play charity and $5,000 for the Travis Manion Foundation. After the bike ride, he moved to California for a short time, working for a comparison shopping engine company. He was laid off and decided to move to Denver to be more near his friends. He recently created Veteranology, a podcast aiming at helping transitioning military find their path forward in life. Oh, and let's not forget, he's also got a dog named Grunt. It's a beagle, right?
Yes.
All right. Welcome, Jay. Man, that's quite the bio. I appreciate it. Why don't you take a couple minutes and just fill in any gaps that I may have missed?
I kind of felt like I gave you too much when I did that, but I worked a lot of different jobs when I was in college. I moved a lot while I was in college. In fact, Since I have been 18 years old, I have not been in the same geographic spot for more than 18 months.
Mm.
And it's been interesting, but it started with, I went to college, and then I lost my mother shortly after I started college. During my second semester, she passed away, and my father wasn't doing too well, so I decided, okay, I'm going to move home. I'm going to help him out, get him back on his feet. And then he got remarried, and I thought I'd stay close. And so I moved across the Mississippi to Davenport, Iowa, where I attended school briefly. And then I decided I wanted to finish back up down at Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville. So just moved around a lot. It was really stressful, but at the same time, I feel like it was the beat of my own drum, and not always of my own best decisions, but I always kept looking forward. Because
Right.
the moment you start looking back and starting to say that, oh, I shouldn't have done that, I shouldn't have done that, you really start wasting a lot of time.
I love interviewing other podcast hosts, particularly those that are in the same space as I am. And so, because you and I have, I mean, even though you're in the Marine Corps, I was in the Army, we both have similar experiences and somewhat backgrounds. And I'm sure you can attest to this as well, the number of people that you have a chance to talk with and to interview as well as I do. It seems like a lot of folks get out of the military and they kind of live this, not everybody, but in a lot of cases, the folks I've spoken with, they kind of live this nomadic lifestyle where they do, kind of go from one job to another, move around quite a bit. I don't know. I think a lot of that has to do with just not being able to maybe kind of figure out what they want to do next, or feel comfortable with, settling down and saying, okay, this is it. This is what the rest of my life looks like. What would you say to that?
I think there is probably a combination of like newfound freedom. So, you don't necessarily have to keep going down the path that you started. When you're in the service, you generally have to finish what you've started. You don't get to quit, but you have a newfound sense of freedom. And at the same time, you probably didn't have that good of a plan to begin with. Well, I'm going to give this a try. That's not really something concrete. That's not saying that, okay, I'm going to take this major, graduate in 4 years. I'm going to make sure I take my GMAT, so 2 years later I can go to business school, blah, 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 blah. I haven't met too many people that put themselves into a pipeline like that. I think that's really kind of normal for really high performance people that are going to like really good universities and they expect something from themselves, and it's kind of been bred into them. But I think when you get out of the service, you just kind of really want to kind of veg for a little bit, and
Right.
a lot of us saw things that I don't want to say haunt, but bother us, or they're a part of our lives now. There's not much we can do about it, and we can't just turn off that memory. And we just kind of want to just be, not have to be. We don't have to want to be performing all the time like we were in the service.
Right. Now, when did you get out?
I got out in May of 2008.
Okay, 2008. So it was a few years after I got out. Now, when you got out, did the Marine Corps? I think this is a military-wide thing. I don't think it's a Army or Marine Corps or Air Force centric thing. But you're familiar with the TAPS class?
Yeah, I had a TAPS class.
Okay, so for listeners out there, for those that are still in, and you are thinking about transitioning or will be transitioning soon, you'll be attending what's called a TAPS class. Now, they didn't have that when I got out in 2005, and I think the military has kind of gone, not full circle, but they've come a long way from having really no transition type services or plans for transitioning military servicemen and women, to at least recognizing the fact that they need something. And so they've created this, I'm told, as a TAPS class. Now, I've never attended it myself, so I just got to ask somebody that did. Did you feel that was adequate enough in order to prepare you for what you were going to face once you actually were out of the military?
No, not at all.
In what way?
So, we had this Air Force retired guy, and that right there, you're retired.
Right.
I can't relate to you. I'm 22 years old. Well, I was 21 when I was getting out of the service. Hadn't even turned 22 yet. And, that right there is an initial bad start. And then I knew I wanted to go to college. I knew that I wanted to go to school and use my GI Bill, but they spent probably 20 minutes tops talking about school at all or the GI Bill.
Mm-hmm.
The entire rest of the time was spent talking about how to put stuff into a resume, how to talk about your service. And again, that was not something targeted towards me. I was one of the few infantrymen that were in that room. And you spend 3 years in the infantry, a year in training. What are you supposed to be able to gauge reality off of? You have no
Mm-hmm.
clue what's available to you out there unless, you've got people on the outside who are, trying to set you up for success. And I don't really know too many people that really have that. I mean, most people go in, their families, don't get to hear from them as much as they want. They don't know what's going on with them. And my parents weren't necessarily couldn't necessarily give me information about college. I was really just going off of my own thing and kind of what I knew from my friends that had gone to school.
Right. And it's interesting because, the way the military works is, you go through basic training or boot camp, right? And you spend your 13 weeks living, breathing, eating, sleeping, just being completely indoctrinated and immersed into this new military lifestyle. And it's all about training and, and conditioning. And then you move on to your advanced individual training where you've got in-depth schooling, day and night, more conditioning, more preparedness. And then you move to, out to the fleet or to your permanent duty station. And, you've got simulators that you're training in. And it's just this constant training and preparedness. And the military, in my opinion, does a really good job of training and teaching us how to be effective Marines, effective soldiers, effective, you name the branch. And then it's time to get out and they spend, a half a day or something like that with a few PowerPoint presentations and think that's adequate enough to be able to set you on your way to be, essentially a civilian out there in the world. And this is kind of my, your story is very similar to mine, except I didn't have any plans to go to college when I got out. I was going to start my own business. And for the listeners of Change Your POV, you're familiar with my story. And but the thing about it is, it really kind of got me is the whole time I was in the Army for 10 years, and everything I needed to know, the military basically provided me with the information guidance and basically showed me and taught me what I needed to do. So I didn't get any training getting out, and those that get the little bit of training in the TAPS class when they get out, everybody just assumes that that's kind of enough information and that'll get them through. But then they get out and they are faced with this new lifestyle, this civilian world, and they quickly realize that they weren't nearly as adequate or prepared enough to face this new chapter in their life as they may have been led to believe. So talk to me about when you first get out, did you go right into college or did you kind of have some downtime first?
I actually got out of the service on a school cut. So I got to leave a few months early. I went straight to school. I went straight to summer school at my community college in my hometown.
Okay.
I took a few classes that I knew were going to be gen eds no matter what I did. So, went straight to the classroom.
And how was it sitting in the classroom with what I would guess or assume to be probably kids right out of high school that probably knew everything about everything already and had opinions galore coming out their ears, right?
So, I didn't interact too much with my peers. I didn't have too many group projects in the classes that I took. I took ethics for philosophy, and then I took speech, and didn't necessarily have any group stuff. But the one thing I remember from my first semester was I was sitting in an ethics class, and my professor is this hippie, makes his own clothes, has like a beard down to his feet.
Like
And
something like out of ZZ Top, right?
there you go. Sure. Wears sandals that he made. And anyway, he's teaching an ethics class, and this one kid is sitting there with his head down on the table, with his backpack. And 15 minutes go by. Finally, the kid just all of a sudden gets up in the middle of class and just like heads towards the door. And the professor's like, "Oh, well, bye. And the kid turns around and goes, oh, I'm sorry. Last night was my birthday and I just partied way too hard. And then he just leaves. And I just start laughing. And the professor looks at me and goes, "What's so darn funny?" I'm like, "So this is college, huh?" and, and he's like, "Well, I think it is." And then he just went back to teaching. And like that right there, I was just like, "Oh man, like what is going on?"
Culture shock for you, right?
Oh yeah, huge culture shock. At that point, I mean, I was still arriving everywhere 15 minutes early.
Right, yeah.
Standing up straight. Everyone was sir or ma'am.
You go to take a corner and you're doing like half right faces, half left faces. Probably not
Well,
that bad.
I was never that motivated.
You wrap up your education, and so it sounds like you kind of have this entrepreneurial type of mentality with these businesses. So talk to us about kind of how those started. Was those intentional or kind of by accident?
It was intentional. So during my first tour, I read the book, and I recommend reading it, but I don't recommend like listening to it, if that makes any sense. Rich
Yeah.
Dad, Poor Dad.
Okay.
I just don't think it has any direction it can give you. I think it just gives you like a mindset to have, and you know that's really important, especially when you're young. And I was 19. I read that book, and I thought, you know what? I would like to build a business. I'd like to create something. And so I remember having a conversation with my best friend on the phone when I got back from my first tour, and we're just having all these conversations about what kind of businesses could we build and all this other stuff. And so I was dating a girl that was up in the Northeast, and she went to University of New Hampshire in Durham.
Okay.
And
Yep.
in Durham, they had a website where you could go to, and it's a really basic website. This is like 2006, 2007. So, you know, not necessarily, you know, really, Yelp wasn't really that big yet. Um, Grubhub, that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
And, you know, this was before like I would say the tech 2.0 boom with like
Right.
Amazon and Facebook and all that stuff. Like they were there, but they weren't huge yet. Well, anyway, this website had all the local eateries, which it was a small town, so you had like a choice of like 9 or 10 places that would deliver, and you could actually go and find the menus and do all the ordering. And I thought, you know, that's a really great idea. So when I got to my college town, I immediately, I don't know, I remember I couldn't sleep that night because I was like, this is a really great idea. There's nothing
Hmm.
like it in town. The town is really separate from campus, so there's not a lot of interaction or like early on interaction. So, like if you're a freshman or sophomore, you spend most of your time on campus, and you don't necessarily go out to Edwardsville as much as the older classmen. And so my friend Brian and I, we said, well, let's build something similar to what was in Durham. And so we built what was called myeddy.com. It was you know, for Edwardsville, so we called it Eddie. And I came up with a mascot, which was just a green cube. And our tagline was everything you're looking for is right around the block.
Mm.
So, you know, our goal was to get the college kids more information about what was going on in the surrounding town. And that lasted 2 semesters. I had to end up leaving that business because my mom passed away. And, you know, I didn't want to, but I needed to help my dad, and my family always comes first.
Right. Yeah. So you ended up doing some other, what was it, like the charity work with the bike rides, or what was that?
Yeah. So, it was a extremely convoluted and amazing experience. But in 2007, when I was on a patrol, I was leading a patrol. Johnny Strong, who was a lance corporal, he was from Texas. Him and I were very similar. We're both raised by our grandparents. Um, he was shot and killed by a sniper. And two
Mm.
weeks prior to that, him and I had been discussing, you know, getting out of the service. He had originally thought that
Right.
he wanted to stay in, but now, you know, he was thinking about getting out, and he wanted to get involved with computer games, computers. He wanted to learn how to program. He wanted to learn how to make all these things. And so, you know, that final conversation was very much imprinted on my mind because, you know, it was the last good, you know, conversation we got to have together while he was alive.
Mm.
And uh I got out, and I found myself 4 or 5 years later. Well, no, I guess this was 3 years later after I got out in a really, really bad spot. And I plan on discussing that really big downturn on my show. But I wanted to do something to memorialize my friend. I wanted to be an extension of him, because I was one of the last people to get to talk to him.
Mm.
And so I felt almost like it was my duty to give him one last hoorah, like
Mm.
put
Yeah.
his name on something that he didn't get a chance to put his name on. So I was thinking about this, and it took me so long. At the time when we were in the service, in 2007, we were talking about going to Penny Arcade Expo together, and it's the largest video game convention in the country. It celebrates everything gaming, board games, video games, anything. And Penny Arcade is a webcomic online. It's the most popular webcomic in the world, and they also created what's called Child's Play Charity, which sends toys and video games to children's hospitals across the country. In
Mm.
2010, they started a Penny Arcade Expo in Boston. And once I read that, I just started thinking, like immediately light bulbs started turning on. It's like, okay, I can go from one to the other. How do I do it? Can I walk? Not enough time. Driving a car isn't impressive. How do we even make this worthwhile? How do I make it something that I would want to put Johnny's name on?
Mm-hmm.
So came to the conclusion, okay, we're going to bike from Boston to Seattle, and we're going to visit 24 of the children's hospitals that Child's Play Charity helps and sends toys and games to. We're going to tell the stories of the child life specialists who use those toys to provide play therapy and physical therapy for the children. I mean, you end up finding out so much about these kids when you start visiting the hospitals. Like some of them
Mm-hmm.
can't leave their rooms and aren't allowed to take visitors because like they're getting bone marrow transplants, and like anything could cause them to get sick and die.
Right.
And maybe the only interaction they have with the person in the next room over is that they play the same Xbox game together at the same time every day. And like, that's how they get to talk to the other person. It's
Mm.
just like, you don't think about all the things that are going on with these children, especially, when you and I get sick and we have to take 5 days off work. Okay, big whoop. We're going to catch up. If
Mm-hmm.
a 10-year-old gets sick and misses 5 days of school, that's tremendous. And
Mm-hmm.
then you
Right.
take in the fact that some of these kids get cancer, some of these kids get leukemia, need a transplant. That's 6 months, a year maybe, and
Right.
their whole life gets put on hold. And so this all these games and these toys and these ways that they can interact with their environment, it helps them learn while they're not in school. It helps them, engage socially while they're not with their friends, because you're
Mm-hmm.
still building up all of these skills. So, um, it was it was basically, okay, we're going to raise money for this charity. We're going to visit all these hospitals, and all that money and everything we do is going to be of in honor of Johnny Strong. So me and Denny Salisbury, another Marine Purple Heart recipient that I served with, he rode out with me from Boston. We started at the Children's Hospital there. We left from Penny Arcade Expo Boston, and set off on a 4,400-mile journey to Seattle. And it was breathtakingly crazy and hard.
I can imagine. Did you make it?
Oh yeah, no, we made it. 4.5 months later, we made it. We were on time. We
Wow.
were never once late for a children's hospital, and that took a lot of gumption and just
Mm.
saying, you know, not giving up today.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, how far into that trip before you're thinking, man, I don't know. This might have been, we might have bitten off more than we can chew here.
So that first day, I had a person that said that they were going to be our support driver, and then 2 months prior to the bike ride said that they couldn't do it.
Oh.
And I immediately went into a frenzy, like, oh my God, like, what do we do? Like, how
Hmm.
do we pull our stuff? And I ended up deciding, okay, we've got a way to do this. We're going to pull bike trailers. And the
Mm.
first first time I had ridden with a bike trailer was the night before on a 2-mile practice run before the actual trip.
Oh, wow.
And so I'm pulling a 90-pound bike trailer for the first time on day one of this trip through the rolling hills of Massachusetts. And um, we finally got to the hospital, and we were a half hour late, and it turns out to be the wrong hospital on the campus. The other hospital is like straight up this gnarly 10% grade road. And I remember thinking, like, what the fuck am I thinking?
Yeah, no kidding.
And slowly but surely, my legs became super powerful. My lungs became pretty powerful. When I finally got to the Rockies and we had to do some serious climbing, I was just able to do it. So you learn a lot about yourself when you're the only person, along with your person on a bike, that you can depend on. And there's no one out there to give you food, money, anything. I left Boston with $20 attached to my name and a good amount of debt.
Wow.
I ended up managing it. But yeah, it was such a 1 in a million shot. And, you know, the only thing we had was the ability to say every day, okay, we're going to get up and we're going to do this.
Right. So where did you sleep and like, how did you eat? Like, how did you get your food?
So I had pretty much everything planned out with who we were going to be staying with, using warmshowers.org and couchsurfing.org up until about DC. Once we got to DC, I was like, okay, well, you know, I'll be working on it as we go. Well, no, because I ended up doing fundraising and emailing people and trying to get money. And then, like, you know, people wouldn't answer back. And I was just, you know, after 8 hours of bicycling 60 miles, you don't have much energy to put towards getting on the computer and doing everything you need to do. So I get to DC and I literally have no idea what's going to happen the next day. And I end up getting contacted by a woman named Megan Goodwin. And she says to me, hey, I've helped a Marine bike across the country from Bain to Pendleton. If there's anything you need help with, you know, I might be able to help you out. And I emailed her back. I said, you're hired. I'll pay you $0. You're hired. And she
Nice.
ends up being our forward logistics specialist, if you will. And she would call cities that we were going to end up in, and the mayor, you know, the newspaper, the fire department, anyone she could think of that would be there to be able to take us in. And we started basically being able to ride into town and have someone waiting for us, whether it be
Oh, wow.
the American Legion at one point, the VFW took us in, DAV took us in at some point. And, you know, our first town in Appalachia, Brunswick, we went and the American Legion put on a spaghetti dinner for us because they knew about us. And we stayed with the commander at his house, and they raised $700 for us and for the charity. And it kind of kept going like that. She would reach out to people, and we'd take their hospitality. And sometimes
That's
we
awesome.
wouldn't be able to find anyone, and like we'd be in town telling people our story, and they'd be like, "Oh my gosh, let me let you like stay in my mom's house." Because one time we were in Ohio, and someone's mom had died, and she was in town trying to take care of the estate, and she had heard us arguing in front of the coffee house because I was like just having a moment of weakness and screaming at Denny. And you know, she heard what we were doing, and said, hey, you know, you guys can stay at my mom's house. So like it was just taking anything we could get and making the best out of it.
That's awesome. Wow, that's really cool. So would you ever do it again?
With a better plan, yes, I would do
Yeah.
something like that again. I have some ideas for my own bicycling and what I want to do. I don't know if I'd do a cross country again, but there are some cycling opportunities internationally that I'd like to take advantage of. Australia, Europe, just get on the bicycle and go.
Yeah. I bet you never look at a bicycle seat the same again, though, huh?
I had quite the callus.
I can imagine. I must get to a point where you're like, because when you're in the Marine Corps and the Army, and you go on those long ruck, those multiple day ruck marches, and you get up the next day and you got hot spots and blisters, and you're like, oh my God, I got to put these boots back on and do it again. I can only imagine after 4 months of that, by the time you get to the end of it, I'm sure you got like calluses like you wouldn't believe. But right out the gate when you first started, I'm sure it was tough.
No, it was it was horrible. e- there was so much to that trip that was horrible, but I mean, there was so much more that was great.
Hmm.
But do you remember those straps you'd sit on in the turrets of Humvees?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Like I remember from my first tour, like my butt was just
Hmm.
always numb because you're sitting on this like 2-inch strap the entire like 7 months you're there.
Yeah, my gunner took one of those bed rolls, and he rolled up the bedroll and he stuck the strap through the center of it and hooked it on the other side of the turret. So he'd sit on essentially the bedroll, the strap on top of the bedroll.
Yeah, that lasts for
And
about a week.
yeah, 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 yep. And then it kept every time he'd swivel. I was the truck commander, so every time he would swivel, the damn bedroll would like be big and bulky, and it would just like swing around and block my vision, and it was awesome. It was awesome. So, how do you define success? I know a lot of people have their own kind of internal definition of that, but what's yours?
When I saw that you were going to ask me that question, I immediately um, just started like getting worried because I last week, and I from the questions that I was asking the group that we're a part of, but you could kind of know that I was dealing with this on my own. Like, how do I decide to success? Like,
Mm-hmm.
is it that I went to a great school and got a great job? Is it that I have the respect of everyone that knows me? Is it um it's really hard for me to answer this question, but I've been thinking about it. And, right now, like I'm 29 years old, I'm about to turn 30. A lot of my friends are having children. I'm still single, but to live your life in a way where other people want you to be a part of their life and to introduce you to others and to ask you for advice and to feel as if like they can trust you, and that right there is a huge part of it. I don't know if that's success in a whole, but that's a huge part of it. And to be able to live in a way where your actions speak before your words,
Mm,
um, that's incredibly important to success because if people can't tell what kind of person you are, um, you're you're not exemplifying it enough with your actions.
mm-hmm.
And uh, yeah, again, that's about all I got. That's about as far as I went with my thought process because it's
No,
something that I'm
that's
still trying to define.
and that's the thing. Success is never an end point, right? It's the journey, in my opinion. And you can do a lot of things in your life, like bike riding across the entire country, taking 4 months and completing it. That's successful. Being a Marine and doing a tour overseas. Raise your right hand and volunteering to be one of the few in this country to serve this nation's flag. That's successful. Starting your own business, when everyone else says you can't or it's a bad idea or you won't make it, that's successful. So you've got many milestones, in your life where you can plant that stake in the ground and that flag in the ground and say, you know, this was a successful point in my life. But you and I, we're of the breed where we're just never happy with that. There's always that something else, that horizon. We know, you could see where the sky meets the earth in that horizon, but we know that it's you're standing on a cylindrical object, and you've got to keep heading towards that horizon, knowing that you'll never actually get there, but you're sure gonna damn try, right?
Yeah, and let me speak to that too. The whole this was a successful point in my life. The word point. Don't get hung up on that. I'm speaking to your audience right now. Don't get hung up
Mm-hmm.
on that. I've lived on my friends' couches because of mistakes I've made. I've been in debt. I have been, with no money in my pocket right before a cross-country bike ride. A lot of embarrassing situations where you look and say, how in the heck did I get here and get through this? But all of those valleys where you probably don't feel that you were at your best or that you were successful, you are still incredibly successful. I mean, the fact that I was living on a couch, I have to remember that I lived a life and treated people the way I did, which led me to even having a couch to sleep on in the first place. To have
Mm-hmm.
people say, Jay, what can I do to help you? It's because of the work that I put in into being a good person and treating people the way that someone should be treated.
Mm.
You can find success by being very Machiavellian and, you know, only worrying about yourself and doing things for yourself. But everyone has low points. And
Mm-hmm.
when you live your life in a way where you treat the people around you like you love them and that you care about them, then when you need that, you will have that.
Mm. No, that's a good point. Thanks for pointing that out, because you're so right. I mean, no one's going to surf through life without struggling with something along the way, or multiple things, or things all the time, it seems like. Can you pick out a one or two things along the way that you just look back on today and say, man, that sure wasn't my greatest moment. I wish I could have had a do-over and done that again.
I wish I would have planned school better. I don't feel like I failed, but I feel like I just kind of fell into what I did.
Mm-hmm.
If I were to go back to school, or if I were 22 again, or talk to that 22-year-old, I'd say, look, you can get into a really good school right out of the military. You don't have to go to a state school. And, I do not regret doing this. I got to build a business with my best friend. I got to move in with him. Um, at Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville was a great place to be. But I have a um, I hold myself to an extremely high standard. And if I could have gotten into Harvard right out of the service, I would have wanted to do that. And that's
Mm-hmm.
just because, that type of prestige and just the history of that school, Harvard specifically, is really important to me. And I wish I would have taken more time to realize what was important to me.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, John Adams is my favorite United States president because of everything he did, not only as a president, he made some mistakes as a president, but everything he did leading up to that point. He lived a life of service to his countrymen, and he went to Harvard. And so, Harvard has don't want to talk too much about Harvard because that has nothing to do with my life, but like, I, I think I just wished I would have had more wherewithal and know-how about what school and what type of school you went to and how much that actually mattered to what kind of jobs you were able to get, what kind of internships you were able to get.
And that comes right along with, you know, educating yourself while you're still in the service. So when you are ready to get out and make these decisions, you've got more information, and you've done a little bit more of that research, and you've maybe even started that networking, plugging along the way, because at the end of the day, that's really kind of what it's about. And I didn't realize that until much later after I got out of the military. And I thought, man, if I had a do over and I could go back, that's what I would have done. I would have started to prepare myself for the days when I was no longer wearing the uniform. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think I've learned a lot along the way as a result, which really kind of is the reason why I am where I am, to help people that, that are in that situation now. So they don't have to go through what I went through and struggle and, kicking, screaming, biting, clawing, whatever I had to do to kind of make it. But so let me ask you this. There's people that we've come across, maybe even ourselves. There's kind of two different sides of the pendulum that things kind of swing on. You get people that like just are very persistent, and they just pursue something to the nth degree, to the point where it's like you look at them and you're like, damn, they should really just give it up because it's just not working. And then you get other people that try something and they quit, much too early on in the process. And you think, man, if they would have just kind of stuck through it, they probably could have made something out of that on the backside. So I guess the question I have for you is, when you're pursuing a goal or a dream or a project and it starts to fail or become more difficult than you thought, how do you know when it's time to pull the plug or keep driving on?
Yeah, I've probably experienced both of these. I had a amazing experience in St. Louis when I was living there at a jiu-jitsu school, and I loved it, but I had to give it up because I went to a tournament and I won, but I tweaked my knee just enough, and I'd hurt that knee before, and this was like 9 months before the bike ride. And I
Mm,
had to go to my instructor and say, "Look, I'm sorry, but I have to quit. I can't take this risk." But I regretted it. Not so much, not really regret, but I missed it. I really miss it. I
mhm,
still miss it. And I tried to join a gym here in Denver, and I signed up for 6 months, and it was not fitting into my life. And I think that's something you need to look into, because who you are when you start something, something that means something to you, it's going to change what it means to you as other parts of your life develop. Maybe you meet someone that you fall in love with. Maybe you have a child. Maybe you stock market crashes. Who knows? But I mean, you need to continuously reevaluate, okay, is this my priority? Is this a sunk cost? If it is a sunk cost, don't bash yourself for it. Understand that you made that decision when you had different information. Now you have new information and you need to move forward with how you're doing it. Every day is a balance for me. I'm trying to train for a powerlifting competition. I'm trying to build my veterinology podcast brand. And sometimes I run into a deadline and I need to publish a podcast instead of going to the gym because I screwed up earlier in the week. I didn't get everything done. I didn't get all my cooking done. Who knows? But, you
mhm,
know, um, continuously evaluate, is this important to me? How important is this versus my relationship? How important is this versus being able to travel?
mhm.
That there's no one way or the other to do it, but just be willing to reflect on yourself. Take time, meditate.
I think that's so important. Oftentimes we kind of cultivate a life where we're in service to others, and I think that comes right out of the kind of that military mindset. And then when you become a civilian, it's very easy to kind of still follow suit and still be the person that's kind of being there for someone and taking care of But there's times where you just gotta kind of stop and say, wait a minute, what am I doing to give back to myself? What am I doing that I'm passionate about? Because if you can't find that one or two things to be able to give back to your own self, then in my opinion, it's been my experience that it's very hard to find that total life fulfillment. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and you're going to run into new avenues of fulfillment that you didn't necessarily know that gave you fulfillment.
Right.
I am now here in Denver and I love it. I'm never going to leave. This is my home, and I've never felt that before. And I was always in transition, moving someplace, doing something.
Mhm.
I always knew that there was something next, and now it's like, holy crap, I'm comfortable. I'm happy here. Like, I'm not going to be moving in 6 months. And so
Right.
I helped out a play. I was a military consultant for the play here in Denver, Curious Theater Company. It's called A Soldier's Fugue, or Elliot, A Soldier's Fugue. And the new type of like success I felt was giving back to my community,
Mm,
not just people, not just humanity, but giving back to something that was now mine,
mhm.
and felt fantastic. So you're going to run into different changes in your life, and building one business, and then you run into a different opportunity, and it's better and it makes you happier. Well, it's time to sit down and have a discussion with the people closest to you and think, should I do this instead?
Mm. How open were the civilians in that play to you as a veteran, a combat marine? Were they kind of weary about your service? Were they open to it? Did they have questions? Like, what was that experience like?
They were extremely Extremely open. I mean, I think when you walk into the arts community anywhere, you can find very open-minded people, people that are curious, and they wanted to hear real things because they wanted to make sure that the characters they portrayed gave professionalism and reality to who the characters were. U.S. Marines, both in Vietnam and the Iraq War, and then a Korean vet were characters. And it's not necessarily making sure that they do everything right, but doing everything in a way that shows the emotion and the character and the development of what happens when you go through these types of situations. So they were incredible. The Curious Theater Company, I mean, it was such a great experience, and I was going to talk about this, but I'll say it right now. If you have a local arts community, go figure out how to be a part of it, and see if anyone's looking for help from veterans or wants to know something about veterans, whether it be a journalist or an artist, a playwright, who knows? But I'm not exactly sure how you'd search that out. I got lucky and had someone who knew that I was doing veterinology, and they put me in touch with them. But um, put yourself out there. Don't be afraid to put yourself out there, and don't get into the wrong way of thinking that civilians just won't ever understand. Well, they're never going to understand if we keep that mindset.
There you go. I absolutely, totally agree. What's been the one thing that you've been able to carry forward? I'm sure there's been many, but what's the one thing do you think you've been able to carry out of your military experience into your everyday, let's call it civilian life? And how has that been able to impact your decision-making process or the way you do things today?
Sure. So I came back from my first tour. I was a Lance Corporal, and Master Sergeant Collette, who was our company Master Sergeant for Weapons Company, came up to me and said he wanted to send me and two other Lance Corporals, to a rifle combat optic instructor course. So the RCO, which was the rifle optic that we used back in 2006 and 7, and I'm sure further on, but it was like the ACOG for all of you who play Call of Duty.
Yep.
But I was sent over to the battalion headquarters, and the staff sergeant was there. He's like, no, this is only for NCOs. Go back. So I go back to the company office, and Master Sergeant is like, or we tell him like, hey, we weren't allowed to sign up. And he just storms out, and he goes over and chews out the staff sergeant and basically says, when I send you someone, that's who I'm sending. And like, puts the staff sergeant on lock, which is always fun to see. But anyway, we go to this course, and it's put on by this retired Marine Corps gunner who was a, what do they call it? Warrant Officer 5, and then became a gunner, and basically a complete expert in a field of military tactics or strategy, or I'm not exactly sure how it goes, but basically gunners are military geniuses, I guess, in a way. Google it and find your own definition.
There you go. Yeah.
But he pulls us all aside, and he's talking to the NCOs, but we 3 Lance Corporals are there, and he says, you know why you NCOs are so damn good? It's because when the lieutenant tells you to take that hill, it's not that you challenge the order, but you take the time to figure out how and why. And you ask questions. You're inquisitive. You want to know what's going on so that you can be the best leader that you can. Because if you send your Marines up a hill for no damn good reason, just to get them mowed down by a machine gun nest that you didn't prepare for, then you failed. And it was just kind of eye-opening, because for me at that time, I had been a Lance Corporal, not really in a position to make too many decisions that affected others. But, I knew I was on that route. I wanted to be an NCO. I wanted to lead Marines. And I took that to heart. And, here's someone who had spent so much time in the military, in the Marine Corps, and he's telling me that I need to analyze what I do and not necessarily, again, question what the officers are giving us orders to do, but analyzing those orders and figuring out the best way to accomplish it. that's what I wanted to do. And I changed the way I kind of approach things, and I became probably a little bit more obstinate because of this. You can talk to my platoon commander about that, but um, I made sure I was damn sure of every order that I gave, and I would
Right.
never ask anyone to do anything that I wouldn't do. And if it was something that required responsibility, then I was going to be the first one to do it, and other people could follow.
Absolutely. Why veterinology? Where did that come about? And kind of what's your mission there?
So 2nd Battalion, 7th Marines has more post-service suicide, has a higher post-suicide rate than any other unit in the United States military, at least as a battalion size. And that's not acceptable. Hold on. When I got finished with the bike ride, we had a raffle for people who bought our T-shirts to support the last little bit of fundraising we did for Penny Arcade Expo, or I'm sorry, the last bit of fundraising we did for Child's Play charity. We had a raffle and you could win something, and one of the prizes you could win was one of our bike trailers. And Joseph Gellings, who was one of the Marines I served with, he was in a different platoon within Weapons Company. He won, and he said that he would take the bike trailer because he had a friend that he knew he would want, who would want it. 3 months later, Joseph Gellings committed suicide. And it just didn't. I mean, I lost my shit. I was screaming in the house. I was just mad. I was storming up and down the hallway. I didn't know how to deal with it. And 22 people a year, the military veterans, they commit suicide, and I had been down that route before in my mind, where I thought that I was worthless, had nothing going for me anymore, and I was going to not want to live anymore. Let's just say that. And I just wanted to put a voice of hope into the veteran community. And so I wanted to tell stories of veterans who had gone out and found their purpose or their fulfillment or their success or their happiness or whatever it was, that got them up in the morning, and pass that around to as many people as I could.
I've listened to your podcast, and you've got everyone on there from, PhDs talking about the effects of, of where they think, the suicide kind of is coming from in terms of like TBI, traumatic brain injuries, and depression and things like that. And there's a lot of studies out there and a lot of information all over the place. And there's definitely a lot of awareness and groups specific to answer, this issue. And my question too is, with as much awareness as there is and information and just so many outlets for veterans to kind of, call or get a hold of somebody, why do you still think today that there is a problem with veteran suicide? And is there anything that we can do differently to help affect or change that?
Well, the first thing I'll say is go listen to Veterinology episode 5 with Dr. Craig Bryan.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the reason that we still have such an issue is, first of all, our society puts a very negative connotation towards anyone who goes to get help for mental illness. And there's a lot of different places where you can seek out help, and you might not necessarily know who to reach out to. You don't necessarily feel like you should burden your friends. This is what was going through my mind. I didn't want to burden the people around me who I felt that I had already burdened so much. You don't want to talk about it because it's just another thing that's going wrong with Jay. It's just another thing that Jay has to deal with, and we don't know how to help him. Or maybe I'm thinking that they don't know how to help me, or I don't want to put that on them. It's any number of reasons. There's lots of reasons. And I think, again, I can't really speak well to it, but episode 5 of Veterinology, put the link in your show notes.
Yep, it'll be there.
That's you're gonna get a whole lot of information about dealing with veteran suicide and what we can do to take it on. And I'd also say, if you want to listen to another one, Veterinology number 13, stopsoldiersuicide.org. Retired Army Colonel or Lieutenant Colonel Jason Roncaroni runs it. He's got a lot of information on helping veterans and keeping the suicide rate down. I'd recommend anyone that's listening to this who is going through any of those dark thoughts or know someone who may be going through those dark thoughts. I mean, even if you have just the smallest inkling, you can call them at Stop Soldier Suicide and put them in touch. Get a caseworker who will put themselves in touch with that veteran, and they're trained to be in contact with these veterans, and they will remain in contact with that person for 2 years on a regular basis.
And I think that's really it, man. I think you hit the nail on the head. I think it's just being available, right? For whatever. And I say that because it just, I mean, as a matter of fact, on Friday night, two nights ago, we're recording this on Sunday. Friday night, come home from work and I go to bed, and I usually turn the volume of my phone off, but for whatever reason, it was on that Friday night. And it starts to ring. It was like 1:30 in the morning, and it wasn't like my regular phone ring. It was a different tone I never heard before, and it was somebody calling me on Facebook Messenger. I didn't even know Messenger had that feature where you can actually call somebody, but it does. And I looked, and it was one of my soldiers that I served with back in Iraq, 2004, 2005. And I didn't answer it at first. I thought maybe he just, it being 1:30 in the morning, I thought maybe he just dialed me or put his phone down or something and hit the button. So I'm like, I didn't answer it. And then like 2 minutes later, he calls again. And I'm like, oh man, that's not, that's not a coincidence. And it's been 12 years since I talked to this guy. And I answered the phone, and I could tell he's been drinking. And he just says, I realize it's probably pretty late there. And I was like, no, man, it's never too late when you're calling me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And he says that he just got done listening to one of my podcast episodes, and I don't remember which one. He didn't say which one, but he said he listened to one of my podcast episodes, and he felt that he could call me and talk to me, and he felt that he needed to call me and talk to me. And I was like, yeah, man, no problem. And so we talked, we reminisced, we told stories back and forth about our times in Iraq. And he's, about a month away from doing his 5th deployment. He's still in the Army. He's been in for 14 years now. And he was just having a rough go at it and just needed somebody to talk to. And without speaking with this guy for 12 years, he calls me out of the blue on Facebook Messenger, and we talked on the phone till the sun came up. It was 4.5 hours that we talked on the phone, And I after I hung up with him, I couldn't go back to sleep because I was just. I mean, the whole reason I put Change Your POV podcast together, and the whole reason I'm doing what I'm doing, isn't just to provide guidance to those that are getting out with their resume and their cover letter and interviewing, and that's part of it. But the ultimate part of it is just helping veterans in whatever way that is. If it's helping that, in those fields, in the resumes and cover letters and interviewing and job seeking and all of that, then fine. But if it's in another way, and this night I think it was in another way, and I got a hold of Bennett, my co-host that's on my show for Friday's episodes, and I said, I was like, this is what I've been wanting Change Your POV to do. I want it to be a positive or have a positive impact on lives of veterans, and I want to be able to help wherever I can. I said, so it actually worked. Why do I seem so surprised when it does, right?
Yeah.
And I know that's exactly, even though you and I are very, very similar in the space that we serve, there's not enough people out there, I think, that you can't have too many people that are offering their hand and saying, if you need somebody to call, I'm here. And that's the thing that he said when I was his team chief back in the day. I was a staff sergeant, he was a PFC and a specialist, and I always told my guys, I didn't care. I said, when we were in garrison before we deployed, I'd say, on the weekends, Friday, Saturday nights, I don't care if you're at a bar and you find yourself, having drank too much, give me a call. I'd much rather drive and pick you up and bring you back than have to come and claim your body in the morgue or whatever, or God forbid, that's the worst case. But even, you getting pulled over and getting DUI, and now we're, towing the line in first sergeant's office. So I created these call cards with, basically the chain of command and who you call first, second, third, and the team chiefs were the first call, and, squad leaders was the second, and platoon sergeant was the third, and it made sure all my guys had that. And that was the first thing he said after 12 years of talking to me. He says, you always told me that, if I ever needed to get a hold of you, to call it no matter what time of night it was. And I said, that's exactly right. And it still holds true today, being 12 years out of the military. I don't really care what time it is. If you just need somebody to talk to, find somebody in your life like me or like Jay or anyone else maybe that you've served with, that you just need to get it off your chest, because I think what you said, Jay, is correct. And a lot of people feel that there's this stigma around asking for help, but a lot of people don't realize that asking for help comes in many ways. It isn't about just going to the VA and seeing a shrink or whatever. Asking for help is just a simple phone call to a buddy you served with. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Like 3 months ago, I was just having a hard time and trying to figure out life. And, it's just, you go through this, and the unfortunate part for veterans is that when you do go through a depressive state, there's probably 10 things hiding in the shadows waiting to remind you of other stuff that you should be sad about. And you need to kind of realize that. But I called my friend, and I remember I was just looking at my phone and thinking, who can I call? Who can I call? And I called my friend and he said to me after we talked for a little bit, he goes, I never thought I'd be on the other end of this call.
Yeah.
And that's part of, I think, when you are kind of hosting a podcast about helping veterans, maybe it seems like the people listening to you, or seems to the people listening to you, that he's got stuff figured out, or he's someone that we all look up to, or whatever it is. But we the people at the top, CEOs on down, go through these things and need to talk, and they're not perfect. They're not 100% whole. It doesn't matter who you are. I mean, call your friend. Just call your damn friend.
Yep. Because at the end of the day, it's not words of wisdom necessarily you're looking for. You just need someone to talk to, an ear to listen. You know what I mean? And sometimes that's all that it takes for me is I get to a point where things just start to kind of pile up, and I just call somebody and just vent and get it off my chest. And I'll go outside so I don't, because at times I might yell and scream because I'm frustrated, and at times I'm crying, and it just, you know, um, like you said, there's things that will be with us for the rest of our lives, and it doesn't matter, who you are, or where you are in life. There's always those things that creep up. And I just interviewed a Vietnam veteran a couple of weeks ago, and 50 years after being back from Vietnam, and he still deals with stuff. And it just was an eye opener to me that I said, you know what, you know it's never going to go away. I'm not saying that I'd ever want to forget anything. That's not what I'm saying. But you know, some days are harder than other days, and there's some times where things just are kind of too hard to manage by yourself. And there's always somebody there that will listen. You just have to be the one to make that move and call. I mean, like that buddy that called me. I mean, it was 12 years since I talked to him, and he called me. He probably had 100 other people he could have called, but he felt he needed to call me, and he did. And I'm glad he did, and I welcome that. And it just kind of goes to show that what we're doing, Jay, you and I, in this space is worth it if it helps just one person get past a moment in their life, or if it helps us get past the moment in our life. It's all worth it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Wrapping up here, there is a question that I ask every guest of this show. And then after the question, then I will turn it back over to you, and you can give me all your links, and I'll have everything that you want to share put into the show notes of this episode. But the question is, as you know, this show is called Change Your POV, or Point of View. So give me an example or a scenario of a time when you believed or thought of something one way, but an event or circumstance occurred to force you to see it from a different perspective. What was it, and what did you learn from that experience?
Yeah, I was halfway through the bike ride. We were in Kansas, and I had suffered a really bad back injury, to the point where the farmer who was going to take us in had to come down the county road to pick us up so that I could just sit down. I got off my bicycle. I couldn't stand up straight. It was that bad.
Mm.
And I was just in such grueling pain. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, like this is it. I'm done. Uh, I failed strong. I failed the kids. I mean, it was just everything. Like, Jay, you're a screw up. I immediately went into full, self-hatred mode.
Yeah.
And I got to this farmhouse, and I met with Chance McKinney, just an amazing man, amazing father, amazing husband, amazing farmer, amazing teacher. Takes us in. His house had suffered storm damage, and so none of the doors could close. They were having, problems with harvest, and there were things that were going wrong in his life. And like, he got everyone within like a 5-mile radius, all the farmers, to come to the house, and they put on a huge potluck for me and Denny. And I just let go. And after talking with people and just seeing good people coming out because of something that I had decided to do, and they believed in it, I kind of gave myself a little bit of credit. And that was probably the first time on that trip I decided to give myself a little credit.
Mm.
Because I was so wound up in raising the target amount of money, in getting to places on time, to getting the right amount of the right amount of presence online and sharing Johnny's story with as many people as I could. I was so wound up in that I forgot to see what I was actually doing. And so, again, it's just taking a step back, going outside, sitting on a flatbed with a dog you don't know, and looking up at the sky. Sometimes you got to do that. Take a deep breath and really, go write down. So many people say this, and I just agree with it. Go write down 5 things that you've accomplished in the past year or month or whatever. And that should change your point of view, because you're probably holding yourself to a standard that you shouldn't, saying things to yourself that you shouldn't. And it's not fair. It's not fair to you. And so when you finally stop that and you start focusing on self-love, and self-care, it really changes your world. I will talk to myself in the mirror and tell myself that everything's going to be okay. I will, in my car, when I start to think, because I have a lot of time to think when I'm in the car commuting, I will tell myself, look at what you're doing. Like, you're fine. I had my wrestling coach, who's now the principal of my high school. I called him. I was just like, I'm going through kind of a tough spot. And he said, you're going home, you're working on a podcast, you're not watching television, you're trying to build a business, you're not going out and drinking at the bars, like you're building something. He's like, that's some Steve Jobs shit. And, he's like, there's millions of people who just don't care, and they, for whatever reason, don't want more out of life, but you do. And realize that that's who you are, that's what you are, and it's okay.
And it counts for something.
Yeah.
All right. So give us your, where can people find you, reach you, and learn more about you?
Post most of my updates onto the Facebook page, facebook.com/veterinology. You can listen to Veterinology on the website, veterinology.com, or you can go to Stitcher or iTunes. I'm on both of those. I am also on Twitter, but generally use that just to get in contact with people. I'm not usually updating things about the website, but I can be contacted via Twitter. You can also email me at j@veterinology.com. I usually get back to people within a few days. I've got a lot of contacts now after I've started this podcast, so I've kind of been slowed down by just the sheer amount of projects and things that I'm privy to. But I'd love to hear from you. If you know a veteran that you'd like their story shared, let me know, and I'll reach out to them and we'll see what we can do.
Cool, man. Hey, thanks a lot for coming on the show and sharing with us your remarkable story. And I appreciate everything that you do, not just for me personally, because you are an inspiration to me, but to the veteran community as a whole. You can find all the show notes for this episode at changeyourpov.com/episode 38. Never miss an episode. Hit subscribe on your podcast player of choice. We have a lot more great content headed your way. If you want to reach out to me directly, you can email me at eddie@changeyourpov.com. I would love to hear from you. Until next time.
Thanks for listening to Change Your POV podcast with Eddie Lazary. Check out more content by going to changeyourpov.com. And remember, your ability and willingness to change your point of view will open doors of opportunity.